College is supposed to be hard. That is, in fact, part of the deal. But there's a difference between challenge and full-blown academic emotional damage. One builds grit. The other just has everyone crying in the parking lot by week 3. Today, we're talking about how instructors keep rigor real without treating student stress like a character-building exercise. Welcome to the What and Who of EDU, the show where educators and thought leaders join us to share their strategies and stories straight from today's classroom. Whether you're looking to boost student confidence, build belonging, navigate new teaching challenges, or figure out where AI fits in, we're here with clear, actionable ideas that you can use right away. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone, and today we're here to discuss how instructors balance challenge with care and keep college hard without making it needlessly brutal. Let's get into it. Tip 1. Take the snow day. Sometimes the most rigorous thing you can do is stop pretending everyone's fine. Dr. Kristen Monroe, an educational research associate at the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning at the University of Illinois, reminds us that instructors are part of the classroom weather system, too.
I think that acknowledgement that everyone is human is really important. And if you can do a pulse check on yourself and feel that you are stressed, just think that your students are probably feeling it 10 times worse, depending upon the time in the semester. I remember there was once, this was before I was teaching college, I was working in high schools, and there was one spring where we didn't have any snow days. And you could just feel how burned out everyone, the students, the staff, the faculty, everyone was in this space. And so sometimes being able to say, you know what, read the room and look and say, everyone in this room is feeling overwhelmed. Let's just take a day and just have catch up, especially if you don't have snow days are really important in New England. Like that break, that time to reset and to have that found time, you can build that into your classes. And thinking about ways of taking the foot off the gas pedal a little bit just to give somebody a day to breathe, it is really useful. And one of the things that I do in my classes is I'll say, okay, today's a catch-up day. Luckily, my office was right across the hall from my lab, so I was able to say, I'm going to go into my office and I just want to talk to each student one-on-one. And in the meantime, everyone else can work on whatever it is. If it's my class, if it's some other class, you're free to decide what is the most important thing for you to work on. And in some cases it was, I just can't be, you know what, is it okay if I just can't be here today? And I'm like, yeah, you know what, especially if you're caught up on everything, by all means, take that mental health day.
Think of it as a snow day without the snow. Nothing magical happened outside. Everyone just needed a minute. Tip 2. Be kind. It doesn't cost a thing. Jennifer Duncan, Associate Professor of English at Georgia State University's Perimeter College, has one simple rule. Kindness does not cost extra. You can be firm, you can absolutely hold the line, but challenge lands differently when students know they're being treated like humans and not tiny workflow disruptions in sneakers.
Someone told me early in my career, a professor who I deeply admire just looked at me once and said, Jennifer, kindness doesn't cost extra. Whatever it is that you have to challenge that student with, even if it's a student that cheated, even if it's a student that there's no option but to fail the class, there's no reason not to be able to speak to someone with kindness. There's no reason, again, not to make someone feel seen and respected And that's not something that always comes easily for me. It's usually something that means that I have to step away and not respond immediately. I have to respond in a timely manner, but not immediately. And then sometimes I have to go back and look at what I have written. Say I've written a student email before I send that, look at it and go, is this kind? I think that you can be firm, you can hold your standards. I've never asked anybody to question those. College should challenge you, but why do the content challenges have to come with personality challenges or cruelness challenges? We're not looking to beat these students into submission. So I think that's just where I come back to over and over again, is reminding myself that kindness doesn't cost extra. I can say and do what I need to say and do and still be kind.
Firm is fine, but cold is not a pedagogy. Tip 3. Be honest about hard. Life is hard. Sometimes it's unfair. If you get a flat tire on the way to work, your boss may not care that your morning turned into a roadside disaster. That totally was not your fault. Dr. Daniel M. Look, the Charles A. Dana Professor of Mathematics at St. Lawrence University, believes that college should acknowledge that reality without pretending every consequence disappears on contact.
I think one thing there is just to acknowledge that that's the case. That's part of my syllabus, that life is hard. Life has challenges. There are some things that I'm not going to be able to control that may be unfair. You get a flat tire on the way to work. It's not necessarily mean that your employer is still going to pay you for that time, even though they realize why you missed the work. It wasn't your fault, but it's also not their fault either. And so I think there's the communication that needs to happen between the professor and the student of, I am going to be understanding of your mental health struggles, but that doesn't mean that every mental health struggle erases whatever obligation or commitment we had to each other. So we need to find a way together to walk that tightrope. And sometimes that involves contracts with individual students. I give free extensions in this class up to 2 days, and I see a student who is always using those free extensions and often asking for another day, then I might call them in for a meeting, and I have done this in the past, and said, okay, what will help you? Let's write a contract here. It's not contract-based grading, but it's a single contract-based thing. You can get an extra 2-day extension 3 more times this semester, and then we'll figure out together, right, at that time, like what happens if you go beyond that. But again, the realization that part of this is on them, part of it's on me. This is hard. We've got to figure out how to do this. And part of it is training you for your life beyond college, where, again, you're still going to be dealing with this. And it's often more rigid after college in terms of skipping obligations due to personal crises.
Understanding the situation is not the same as making the situation disappear. And resilience is the extra credit assignment that nobody told you about. Tip 4. Stretch, don't snap. College should stretch students. Dr. Star Sinclair, assistant professor of psychology at Florida Gulf Coast University, gives this whole episode its best metaphor. Because growth, grit, confidence, coping, all of that lives in the stretch.
I use the analogy of like a rubber band, right? Like, I believe that college should stretch people, stretch your thinking, stretch your sort of social skills, your emotional, toolkit and intelligence. I think being in college where you are now in a center of learning, but it's not just learning what's in the book, right? It's those cognitive as well as those non-cognitive skills. Some people learn to be more resilient in college, or to have more grit, or to navigate feelings of imposterism or imposter, I think all of those things are very important. So how to adopt healthy and functional ways of navigating stress and figuring out that, sleep health is important and all those things. So I definitely think stretching is important because we need to, right? We're preparing for these next arenas of life that we must enter in and be able to weather whatever happens and be prepared to be open and to apply what we're learning. All that stuff is great, but there is such a thing as too much, right? We want people to stretch. We don't want people to break. Content knowledge, okay, yes, but it's important that I help them to practice thinking beyond the text on the page, right? It's important that we engendered skepticism, right? It's important that there is this love for the process of learning, not necessarily just focusing on the outcome, because the outcome may or may not be the grade that you wanted or exactly what you wanted to see, but did you learn something new and can you apply it in some way, shape, or form? So for me, it's the rubber band. Stretching is important, but students don't need to be breaking themselves. It's so important for me that no matter how a student does, ultimately at the end of their experience, they have walked away with some valuable skill that they can then take to the next step of whatever they're going to do. I feel that it is part of my responsibility and an expectations that students should have of their professors, that their professors are there to be support through this process, right? I always talk about being the collaborator in this process with the student, right? It's a responsibility that I do not take lightly. But I also understand that I'm not a gatekeeper. I open doors.
Rubber band is the whole philosophy. What follows is what it looks like in practice. Tip 5. Build grace in early. Dr. Erica Martinez, professor of instruction at the University of South Florida, has a smart answer to the flexibility problem. Don't wait until week 8 to invent it. Build grace in from the very beginning and decide where the flexibility lives before the semester gets messy, because it will get messy.
So for this one, it goes back to building a lot of grace up front. I know that life is going to happen to all of us, and not here to judge which student is going to be more heavily impacted and needs more grace from a mental health perspective. But I still need to maintain a level of rigor in the course. And it is a balance. But I think for me, being very transparent, making those decisions at the start of the semester and being confident that I have allowed a lot of flexibility in my course already is the way that I approach that. And then if there's some things that happen out of our control, like we had those 2 or 3 hurricanes a couple semesters ago, and school was closed a total of 8 or 9 days during the middle of the semester. So then you have to increase flexibility on the fly. But for the most part, I just build a lot of that grace up front.
Grace works a lot better when it isn't a last-minute panic move. Think of it as the difference between improvising in a thunderstorm and carrying an umbrella on purpose. Tip 6. Lower the stakes, not the standards. Betsy Langnes, psychology department head at Jefferson Community and Technical College, teaches in an online environment where isolation can sneak in fast and students can disappear quietly. They still have to do work, but they should know that one rough go at it doesn't mean the semester is over, and they should go live in the woods.
Yes, this is one of the toughest parts of teaching right now, and especially in an online environment. Students can feel so isolated. So I try to focus on creating consistency. There's consistent communication, there's consistent pacing and consistent workload, so they know what they can expect every week. We are creatures of habit. And so if we can create that consistency, I think that helps alleviate some of that stress and mental health. I also try to build in some small low stake activities like that are tied to readings, that they get 2 attempts on their quiz at the end of the content area instead of just 1. So that kind of allows them that ability to have some of those low stakes that, yes, I can take it again if I really need to go back and relearn this material. And then applying the material once again to their everyday lives really helps the students see the relevance in their learning, and that they can get feedback from fellow students and not feel like that they have to be perfect, that they can have that conversation with their peers. And it really pushes students to think critically, but it also feels like it's achievable. So it's not really about lowering standards, it's about creating a course where students can succeed and take care of themselves.
Because students shouldn't feel like one bad grade means they've been voted off the island. Academically, that is. Tip 7. Make the ask visible. Students do better when they know what's being asked, why it matters, and how they can show what they know. That's why Dr. Sarah Lehman, professor of biology and STEM outreach coordinator at the University of Mount Olive, doesn't lower expectations. She just makes them visible and lowers the panic.
Yes. So I think it's important to not necessarily lower my expectations, but keep it very clear. Make it very transparent what I ask of the students from the very beginning of the semester, and then like revisiting that throughout the semester, offering that flexibility in how students are able to demonstrate their strengths and what they have learned, to kind of minimize the stress. If they're just not good written test takers, but maybe they're very creative, they'll shine or excel in other areas that will help their grade. And then I think it's really important to recognize and treat students as human beings and individual people, and not just heads or bodies in a classroom, right? Just making sure that they're recognized for being somebody that does have a lot of challenges, and might need just a little bit of a break every now and then.
Transparent expectations don't lower the bar. They remove the blindfold. Students can rise to the challenge a lot faster when they can actually see it. Tip 8. Do the hard part early. Dr. Jennifer Ripley Stickle, teaching professor and non-majors biology program director at West Virginia University, has built a course structure that solves a lot of the stress problem before exams ever show up. That's because half the grade is exams and the other half is low-stakes work and participation. But here's the trick. She uses the low-stakes side to do the hard stuff with the students before the pressure ever spikes.
Yeah, it's tough to balance mental health and challenging your students. So I balance my classes with about 50% of their grade is from exams and 50% is from these low stake assignments and participation. And it is the participation, low stake assignment contribution to the class where I really challenge the students. I challenge them with assignments that are not knowledge-based, that are case studies, analysis, application work. So these homework assignments, these participation things we do in class focus on these critical thinking skills, thinking outside the box. But the good thing is that's half of your grade, but you get to do it with me to help you. You get to do it with your peers are available to work with you at this time. So my objective with the students is that by the time it gets to exams, they don't have to study for exams. They did all the hard work, all the challenge was on this participation and assignments where they had resources to build the skills they need. And by the time they get to the exams, they're like, well, that's easy because you learned it.
By the time the test shows up, it should feel like a sequel, not a jump scare. Tip 9, keep the deadline. Use judgment. Deadlines got weird after the pandemic. For a while, a lot of instructors were stuck between two bad options: to either be endlessly flexible or go full deadline police mode. Mary Gurley, a psychology instructor at Gaston College, has landed somewhere more useful, because while the deadlines are real, so are students' lives.
Deadlines, I feel like, became this like really big headache during the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, it was like for the first couple of years after the pandemic, it was like, I think all the instructors kind of went through this thing was like, you do eventually have to turn stuff in. So I think I've kind of like crossed that bridge now. I'm kind of like, I've turned that corner. I mean, I've got some pretty, strict deadlines in place and they're going to stay there. But I mean, I do think that it's really important to be flexible in circumstances. And that's just something that's what works for me. I feel like that's closer to real life. I feel like that helps students. I do think there's going to be some students who you're probably never going to be able to help. And you will see that highlighted in the way that you maybe give them extensions a couple times and it never works out for them. And that's okay. That was part of their path. That was part of their story. That was that time for them. And that's all right. It's fine to be part of that story for that student. It doesn't mean that you have to run your entire class like that. But I do think you need to pay attention to specific circumstances and specific situations.
Because after the pandemic, many instructors realized flexibility wasn't the problem. The lack of boundaries was. Tip 10, keep a second window. Dr. Ryan Herzog, Associate Professor of Economics at Gonzaga University, knows students can care, prepare, and yet still hit a wall. Sometimes they've done everything right, and they're just not ready on that particular day. So he creates a second window. That might mean a later exam option, a little room for a mental health day, or simply acknowledging that students are humans before they are gradebook entries.
Yeah. My wife's also a professor at Gonzaga, and she every now and then will share emails we get from students. And she shared an email from a student that just sent her an email and said, "I'm sorry I missed class. I need a cura personalis day." So at Gonzaga, we're a Jesuit university, and part of the mission is cura personalis, the education of the whole person, your own well-being and self. And so we've done a lot to lean into the mental health aspects and the mental health challenges that students are going through. And we just thought it was funny that the student just said, "You know what, I'm just taking a cura personalis day. I'm just taking the day off for my mental health." So I think we've done a pretty good job of recognizing that balance. And I've tried to do that in my classes where, I tell them, look, I'm going to have an exam on Wednesday. We're about ready to head off for Easter break. I tell them, look, I want you to take the exam on Wednesday, but if you're showing up for class every day and you're here and you're not on your phone and you're showing me you care as much as you can, and you wake up on Wednesday and you just are exhausted for whatever reason. You had a long day on Tuesday, or you received bad news, or you just need a mental health day. You need a break. Then I just automatically have started a second exam window. And so am I making it easier on them? Sure. Is the college aspect still challenging them? They're still going to have to take the exam. They're still going to have to study. They're going to have to do all of the things that are necessary. We've all had those days, right? We've all had those moments where, you know what? I'm not going to be able to function today. We try to fake it, make through, but there are days where, you know what? I'm just going to take the day off.
Students still have to do the thing. They just don't have to pretend they are robots with flawless timing and zero nervous system. Today we talked about 10 ways instructors are holding on to rigor without acting like suffering is the curriculum. We heard about rest days, kindness, transparent expectations, low-stakes challenges, and more. If you try one thing tomorrow, make it this. As you plan for your next semester, look at one place in your course where stress is doing work that better design should be doing. Because challenge can absolutely build students, but only if they can stay in it long enough to grow. If this episode gave you an idea, send it to that colleague who still thinks toughness is a course policy. Follow the show, leave a quick rating, or share it with someone who could use a reminder that rigor and humanity are not, in fact, mortal enemies. I'm Marissa, and this is the What and Who of EDU. We'll see you next time.